Rebecca Richards is a lecturer in international relations at Keele University, and she joins me now. Rebecca, thanks so much for joining us. Now, what do you make of the situation there in Zimbabwe, or the celebration rather?
Well, I think the signs that are coming in the pictures that are coming out are absolutely incredible, and it's remarkable to think that Mugabe is gone, everybody's right, and it is a step for Zimbabwe. The question is it a step forward, or is it a step sort of in the same direction? And I think I would have to be cautiously optimistic here and say there's potential for Zimbabwe to move forward, but the transition that takes place is going to be a tricky one. Dealing with the expectations of the population is not going to be easy. Absolutely. And we have to remember that ZANU-PF is still in power. The party has not changed. And Mnangagwa, even though he's a new face, he's still been part of ZANU-PF leadership for a long time. So whether he makes changes, whether he brings about reforms, and even whether there are elections and when those take place, those are questions that still have to be asked, and we don't have answers for them.
Exactly. So many questions at this moment in time. And you mentioned reforms. What kind of reforms do you think would need to be made? What kind of reforms would need to be made to encourage, well, credible reforms? Let me preface it with that. What kind of credible reforms would Zimbabwe need to encourage investment and to lift the country really up from
There obviously need to be economic reforms. The Zimbabwe economy is about as low as it can go, and those are challenges that will need to be faced. But we also need to see political reforms. We need to see a change in how governance is carried out. We need to see inclusion of opposition within political space, and we need to see free and fair elections. Those are things that will have to come if we want to see a truly democratic Zimbabwe and a prosperous Zimbabwe.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the legacy of Robert Mugabe. How do you see this? Is it mixed? Is it good? Is it bad?
I think the legacy of Robert Mugabe will always be one of violence and oppression, and we can't get around that. We still don't know why he stepped down when he did. It's likely that he did this to avoid the impeachment proceedings, and that would be a face-saving measure. We don't know what kind of deal he had. We know that there was speculation that he had been guaranteed immunity for his family and safety for himself and his family. But he's always going to be remembered as a dictator that ruled for 37 years and was quite violent during that time.
Okay. And what do you think prompted his resignation? Because if we look at his speech on Sunday, he really looked like he was, in another galaxy. Do you think he bowed to the pressure? Do you think he maybe even finally turned on the TV and saw that, he had no support, and finally saw everyone, all the protests, thousands of people in Zimbabwe and abroad asking him to go?
I'm not sure if he turned on the TV and saw the pictures and that finally made him change his mind. He probably got a deal. There's likely to be a deal behind the scenes that we don't know about yet. And there has been quite a bit of pressure, especially from within the South African region, for him to go. There's pressure within the party. It could be that he just did this to avoid the impeachment. Leaving on the back of an impeachment proceeding would not help the legacy that he thinks he could have. So it could just be face-saving on that.
And the impact on the rest of the continent, what do you think the impact will be?
It's quite an interesting one, simply how this has taken place. We didn't necessarily see a military coup. We saw a long-term dictator who was removed through legal means and legal processes. So I think in terms of where democracy stands and where those expectations stand in Africa, that's quite an interesting one to watch as we go forward. But I'm sure in terms of other long-term rulers in the continent, they might be a bit wary at this point in time, because the man that we thought would not go has gone.
And just, we mentioned a bit earlier about the legacy. You know, if we look at history, what do you think history will say about today and about Robert Mugabe's 37 years in power?
I think history will not look upon him kindly. He will go down in history as one of the long line of long-term and often violent dictators in Africa. Him stepping down likely avoided any increasing political tensions and possibly violence. So if there is some positive to his legacy, it is that. But he's not going to be remembered fondly.
Okay. Rebecca Richards, thanks so much for your analysis. That's Rebecca Richards from Keele University. Thanks so much. Now, it's an extraordinary end to the presidency of a man who has led the country since its independence in 1980.